Great to see so many friends, and as long as I remember Navin, but my 5 points of intervention would be very brief, and I made them briefer, but we've discussed this over so many decades. I recall meeting my friend Navin in the 70s of the last century, and we would often travel on a bus to and fro from Chandigarh. His destination, India, was his passionate article of faith. And the sheer invention of tourism in the early, sort of newly created state of Haryana was one of his very consistent beats. And I recall Chappie Mishra was central to both of us as young men. And Navin got to write plenty about the many birds perched on state highways as tourist complexes, out of creating the highways, in fact, but also going into Pagdandis, which bought out things from the villages, bought out places which nobody would have gone to. They didn't know they existed. Roads went to that area principally because of what Chappie had in mind to create that network. And then my plans, of course, was different. I wasn't talking about the tourist complex, although I was assigned one to work with. When I finished, those plans was on a rural hub created by villagers themselves, and but it never took off to spark the concept of rural tourism. And rural tourism is, of course, what you refer to right now. But I said domestic tourists, whether it's dharamsalas, yes, dharamsalas haven't come into the formal infrastructure, but Guni Jamkhanas and Bara Balutedar, things that could have been set up where directly the stakeholders could benefit from intervention, never really happened. Rural youth were never really, especially in tribal areas, through co-op modes, cooperatives were never really considered. And when I see many people here, and Navin, after so many years, we've been speaking about, it's all very familiar. It's things that are not new. I'm repeating what has been said. There was a whole issue of orientation of local people as guides of oral histories, connecting the tangible with the intangible resonances. There was an interfacing of traditional knowledge systems with evolving technologies, indigenous like beauty clinics and in villages created for small towns and bastis as part of health tourism, but never really occurred as health tourism. But creating an annual collection of our best souvenirs, our takeaways, a mapping of skilled craftspeople. It's conversion to utilitarian objects offered a huge imaginative canvas. We could have mobile kiosks, retails, and hearts near tourist spots, but nothing really happened. And that is the problem. We get the present highway presentation. I made a appeal to the minister saying that, which you mentioned again and again, that connecting arts and crafts to infrastructure would be the next thing. It just can't be left to emporiums and museums. It has to go into rest houses. It has to go into villages. It has to go to where people go. And why should all highways be for freight? It could be slow travel, and everything doesn't have to go by air. But I think the more poor one is, the more extraordinary the hospitality, the khidmatgars. This is a paradox between poverty and culture. And and also this whole hospitality thing. Atiti Devo Bhava, we say. But can the motivation for making money be equated to making a visitor feel like a god? Do we present a bill to devtas? And now the greatest luxury has no price tag attached to it. And we know this and have experienced it. I know I'm being totally idealistic. I'm nothing else all these 70 years. But how to make a business out of something that is best offered free is the dichotomy. And I still don't know that hospitality, when it gets converted to a business, which most of I've been talking to Navin on often, that all the gatherings, always hoteliers and people in the trade. But really, when we talk of Atiti Deva Bhava, then it's everyone. So there are many, many issues that come on the way when we get to the Pagdandi. and we get off the highway. And these have been taken up over the last 60 years. I know when Navin has mentioned them in the book here and there, but I do not know why it doesn't really start showing some concrete results. This can't be just put on show. They are important to be able to create what the magic of India. But I like the parts in your book where you very pragmatically state that unless these facilities are not enjoyed by the people themselves, what are we talking about tourism? There has to be a certain level of integration, and also people must, tourism is, Paryatan still, if you utter the word Paryatan, they'll think the word's not a word people understand in the villages of India. So I think that point that it has to get more than just being tourism. So tourism has to reinvent its name. It has to become part of something much bigger. Economic indices as the one way to measure travel, and I want another word other than tourism. I think there's much more to people going out, reaching out than high-end tourists who can pay big bucks for reviving our economy. I think there's a huge amount to be said about creativity at the rural area, in the rural areas where there are people who want to meet people, who want to have extended market. Whether that comes into the formal nomenclature of tourism as you're speaking, Amitabh, I don't know, because I think these are things that we've been speaking about for about 60 years, but they still haven't been able to see a coherent action on the field. So you can call it tourism and you can say, okay, domestic tourism or rural tourism, but I think it's a little more than just tourism. I think there's an ecosystem that creates, and it's the ecosystem that I'm talking about. Tourism is one end of the spectrum, an important one, but I think we're talking about an ecosystem of appreciation, of conservation, of identity, of values, of not just doing bhandbazi and being, just an experience. I think we have to retain something for ourselves.